Hello everyone, and welcome back. Inside Nero's golden cage, life in the emperor's palace. If you opened your eyes and found yourself in a palace made entirely of gold, you might think you had woken into a dream. But in Nero's Rome, that dream would quickly sour. Every wall gleamed with reflected firelight, every surface shimmered with wealth so extreme it made you dizzy, and every inch of it whispered the same warning. You are not free here. Welcome to the Domus Aurea, the golden house of Emperor Nero. From the outside, it was meant to prove the power of Rome's ruler, the man who believed himself equal to the gods. Inside, it was something stranger, part temple, part prison, part stage. And for those who lived within its walls, especially the women kept closest to Nero, the difference between safety and ruin was often decided by a single glance. Tonight, we are stepping into that world, a place where silence was survival, beauty was a weapon, and applause was the only sound that mattered. The story begins with light, thin, filtered sunlight crawling through the lattice of the emperor's golden palace. It does not fall on stone or brick but on marble and jewels, scattering across a ceiling painted with gods who look suspiciously like Nero himself. The air smells of incense and roses, though the scent is heavy enough to make you feel caged. You lie on a bed so large it could fit a small family, covered in silks that slip like water over your skin. The sheets are perfumed with oil from the east, rare and expensive, imported by merchants who risked storms and pirates to please the emperor's whims. For a moment, it feels peaceful. The quiet is soft, the light gentle. Then you remember what that quiet means. In Nero's palace, silence is not comfort, it is control. You are one of many women chosen or taken to serve the emperor's household. Some call you a concubine, others a companion, a muse, a gift. The titles change. The truth does not. You are decoration, a living symbol of wealth. Your existence is meant to make the emperor's world seem divine. Outside the palace, Rome wakes up in a very different rhythm, shouts from the market. Hooves on cobblestones, the hiss of bakers pulling bread from hot ovens. Ordinary life still breathes beyond these walls. But inside the Domus Aurea, time bends itself around one man's mood. And that man, Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, is still asleep. You hope he stays that way. Before the emperor rises, the palace must come alive. Servants glide across marble floors, their sandals barely whispering. They carry jugs of warm water, trays of fruit, jars of ointment and perfume. Their faces are trained into masks, calm, unreadable. They move like ghosts because being noticed here can be dangerous. When they reach your room, they do not speak. They begin their ritual of preparation, washing, dressing, adorning. It is a dance repeated every day, performed by hands that never tremble. You stand still while they braid your hair, their movements precise and silent. The oil they use smells like jasmine. It makes your skin shine. Everything is perfect, too perfect. Even the water in your basin has to be the right temperature. Even your breath feels rehearsed. You are being prepared for the day's first performance. Because that is what life in Nero's palace is, an endless theater. The emperor plays the god, and everyone else plays the worshipper. The stage is made of marble and gold, and the audience can never leave. When people outside hear the name Nero, they think of chaos, the man who watched Rome burn, who blamed others, who emptied the treasury for his own glory. But inside the palace, his cruelty took a quieter form. It was in the way he demanded admiration like air, how he needed every glance to feed his reflection. That reflection was everywhere. Statues carved in his image stood in every hallway. Mosaics on the walls showed him driving a chariot across the sky, painted as the god Apollo. Even the silver plates bore his face. To live here was to live inside the emperor's mind, surrounded by his obsessions, his moods, his fantasies. And the strangest part? People called it paradise. When Nero unveiled his golden house, he declared, "Now I can finally live like a human being." For everyone else, it was a reminder that they lived only to make him feel divine. The Domus Aurea stretched across more than 100 acres. There were gardens with artificial lakes, fountains that sprayed wine instead of water, and dining rooms where the ceilings rotated to drop flowers and perfume on the guests. The walls were coated with precious stones. The floors shimmered like rivers. And beneath that beauty ran a simple truth: luxury here was not comfort, it was surveillance. The gold did not protect you. It watched you. You walked through the corridor toward the central hall. The mosaics glitter under your feet. Everything is polished so bright you can see your reflection, multiplied hundreds of times. It is beautiful and eerie, like being surrounded by silent versions of yourself. Each reflection asks the same question: how long until I disappear? Because people do disappear here. Servants one day, musicians the next. Even senators vanish quietly when they stop applauding loudly enough. No one asks questions. The marble walls remember nothing. That is the secret power of this palace. It does not need chains or guards. It keeps you obedient through spectacle, through the fear of being erased from it. Every inch of the Domus Aurea was built to remind you that Nero is not just ruler but artist, creator, son. The rest of you are furniture in his masterpiece. You exist to make his world shine brighter. By the time Nero wakes, the palace hums like a living organism. Musicians tune their instruments. Servants carry trays of honey, dates, bread, and roasted fruit. The smell of spiced wine drifts through the hall. You are summoned to attend breakfast, not to eat, but to be part of the scene. The emperor likes to be surrounded by beauty while he begins his day. When he enters, everyone stands. Nero is still young, still handsome, in that dangerous way of men who know their charm can ruin lives. His eyes shine with self-satisfaction. His voice, when he speaks, fills the room like a song he expects everyone to know by heart. He does not say good morning. He says, "Behold the dawn." That is how he talks, like a poet in love with his own echo. The others laugh softly. You join in, because that is the rule. In this palace, laughter is not joy. It is strategy. The emperor picks up his lyre, strums a few notes, and begins to sing. His voice is decent, not divine, not terrible, but no one would dare tell him that. You keep your face composed, eyes wide, hands folded. When the song ends, there is a pause. A heartbeat of silence. Everyone looks at everyone else, terrified of being the first or last to clap. Then someone starts. The applause spreads like wildfire. Nero smiles, basking in it. And for a moment, you see it clearly: his empire does not run on power or soldiers or gold. It runs on approval. From the outside, Rome still calls him Caesar, the most powerful man in the world. But inside his palace, Nero is simply an actor who can never stop performing. Every audience must love him, every gaze must confirm his greatness. That is why he built this house. It is not just a palace, it is a mirror hall where he can watch himself reflected forever. The walls may shimmer with gold, but beneath that shine, there is rot. Rome is suffering. The people are rebuilding from the fire, paying heavier taxes, struggling for food. But inside these walls, Nero tells himself everything is fine. The empire, he says, is at peace. The gods smile upon him. And every nod, every compliment from those around him, helps him believe the lie. You realize something important as you stand there among the others. This palace is not about Nero's power, it is about his insecurity. People like him do not crave love. They crave confirmation. And confirmation must be constant. That is why silence here is dangerous. Because silence can sound like doubt. When the meal ends, the concubines are dismissed to prepare for the next part of the day. You walk past fountains shaped like sea creatures, past marble statues of gods mid-battle. The sunlight bounces off every surface, too bright to look at for long. In your own reflection, you notice something strange. You are beautiful, but not in a human way anymore. The palace has turned you into an ornament. The oils, the perfumes, the jewels, they have erased your individuality and replaced it with shine. That is how control works here. It does not chain your body. It polishes it until you forget it is your own. The attendants bring you to a bath filled with warm milk and petals. It smells divine. You sink into it, and for a second you let yourself believe it is luxury. Then you remember the truth, this is not for your comfort. It is maintenance. You are being polished for display. Like marble before a feast. In the distance, you hear laughter echo through the halls, Nero's laughter. It bounces off the walls, sharp and hollow. Rumors say Nero once watched the city of Rome burn and claimed the destruction inspired his art. Whether true or not, that image of the emperor playing music while flames consumed the city feels perfectly believable inside this palace. Because Domus Aurea is built on the same idea. That beauty justifies suffering, that art excuses cruelty, that power can disguise itself as genius. But the gold does not hide everything. You can feel the cracks. You see the exhaustion in the servants' eyes, the tension in the courtiers' smiles, the way every conversation ends too quickly. The fear is constant, humming beneath the surface like a low note in a song that never ends. And somewhere inside you, a thought begins to form, perhaps this is not a paradise at all. Perhaps it is a warning about what happens when admiration becomes worship, and when worship becomes survival. When night comes, you will perform again at dinner, at music recitals, at whatever scene the emperor decides to stage. But for now, as you sit in your chamber and the last light fades from the sky, you let yourself breathe. You can't escape the palace. You can't defy Nero. But you can do one small, silent thing. You can remember who you were before this. And that is its own act of rebellion. Because in a world where everyone must pretend, remembering the truth, your truth is dangerous, but it is also power. Maybe one day, centuries from now, people will walk through the ruins of this place and see only beauty. They will marvel at the gold, the mosaics, the art. But if they listen closely, maybe they will hear something else too. The faint echo of all the people who survived by staying silent, who lived through the emperor's dream and saw it for what it was, a gilded cage built by fear. That is where our story begins, not with the fire of Rome, but with the quiet glow of a palace that tried to outshine the sun. And as you will see, even gold can burn. If someone were to walk through the Domus Aurea without knowing its story, they might think it was built for pleasure. Every hallway gleamed. Every room overflowed with art, scent, and sound. But those who lived inside knew better. Luxury here was not freedom. It was obedience covered in gold leaf. The emperor believed beauty could erase fear or at least disguise it. So he turned the palace into a living performance of control. Everything you touched reminded you who owned it. The silk on your skin, the jewels at your throat, the perfume clinging to your wrists, all of it came from him. And that was the point. Nero did not need to chain you. He only had to make you so drenched in comfort that you forgot what comfortless freedom even felt like. Every object carried a hidden rule. The gold cup you drank from reminded you not to tremble. The mirror framed with pearls reminded you to smile when he entered. Even the servant's silence was a form of choreography. Nobody shouted in the golden house, because shouting meant emotion, and emotion meant chaos, and Nero could not bear chaos unless he caused it himself. At first, you try to believe that this wealth might protect you. That if you play the part well enough, stay graceful, stay quiet, stay golden, you will be safe. But the palace has a way of teaching you otherwise. It gives you everything until you realize that everything is not really yours. When you wake in silk sheets and stretch your arms, you notice the weight of your bracelet. It is beautiful, intricate, carved with ivy leaves, but heavy enough that it presses into your skin. That is when you understand. What no one says out loud, decoration here doubles as restraint. Every gem is an anchor. Every gift is a reminder that you belong to someone else's vision. Even the air feels orchestrated. The scent of roses is never accidental. Slaves scatter petals before the emperor walks by. The light itself is engineered mirrors placed to bounce sunshine into the halls, not to warm them, but to make the gold burn brighter. Everything serves the illusion. The golden house is not just a palace. It is a body built to worship one man's ego. And the women inside it, concubines, dancers, attendants, are its heartbeat. They are the proof of his control. Each of you has been chosen because you embody something Nero wants to own: youth, beauty, grace, obedience. You are what power looks like when it dresses itself up as art. Sometimes, when he speaks of the empire, Nero calls it his instrument. He says Rome sings through him. But you have learned the truth. Rome does not sing. It echoes. Every voice in this palace is tuned to one frequency, his. You have to watch yourself constantly, even in private, because privacy does not exist here. Someone is always listening, always reporting, always adjusting the music of fear. You notice how even the servants walk measured steps, eyes down, hands folded. They are not just trained. They are choreographed. The quiet is deliberate. It is the sound of submission perfected over years. In the golden house, no one's allowed to make an unapproved noise. The emperor's laughter fills the halls like sunlight, but your laughter must never reach his volume. Your footsteps must not echo louder than his song. There are stories whispered in the baths about a dancer who once laughed too freely. Nero stopped the music, asked who dared interrupt, and had her sent away. Sent away in palace language means erased. No one says her name now. It is as if she never existed. The lesson spreads fast. Joy here is not spontaneous. It is scheduled. That is how control operates in a golden cage. It is not about visible violence. It is about teaching people to fear the invisible boundaries, the ones drawn in scent, in sound, in glances. You start measuring your life in gestures: how deep to bow, how long to smile, how slowly to breathe. You learn to speak in compliments that mean nothing and silences that mean everything. The strangest thing is that after a while, the luxury begins to change your sense of what is real. You stop remembering what stone feels like beneath your feet because marble has replaced it. You stop seeing night properly because the lamps never go out. The palace does not just control your actions. It rewires your senses. It builds a world so dazzling you forget the world beyond it exists. Sometimes, when you walk past the open balcony, you catch a faint smell of smoke and bread drifting up from the city. It hits you like a memory, raw, human, ordinary. Down there, people still argue, laugh, love without permission. Up here, every breath feels rehearsed. That is when it hits you: the gold is not for beauty. It is for blindness. Nero learned something that every tyrant eventually discovers: control works best when it is disguised as privilege. If he gives his prisoners comfort, they will decorate their own cells. If he gives them jewels, they will guard the chains themselves. And so you play your part. You adjust the bracelets, you smile at the guards, you sit still when he enters. Outwardly perfect, inwardly hollow. But sometimes, deep in your chest, a thought stirs like a heartbeat that refuses to be trained. This is not devotion, it is survival. That realization is dangerous. You hide it the way others hide bruises. You learn to nod at Nero's songs, to call him divine, to shine when he looks your way. But inside, a quiet rebellion forms, the kind that no one can see. You start to understand that silence can mean two things. It can mean surrender. Or it can mean strategy. From that moment on, every act of obedience becomes a disguise. You bow, but you do not believe. You smile, but you remember. You wear gold, but you never mistake it for warmth. The emperor will never see it. But deep beneath the surface of his perfect palace, something small and human still flickers, an untamed pulse that no amount of luxury can smother. It is not freedom yet, but it is the beginning of one. That is the secret of Nero's world: his control was never absolute. It glittered, it dazzled, but it depended on belief. And the moment someone inside stopped believing in the illusion, the whole empire of gold began to tremble. Even if just a little. Because every empire built on fear, no matter how shiny, eventually cracks under the weight of its own perfection. When the sun fully climbs above Rome, the palace begins to breathe louder. Servants rush through corridors carrying trays of figs, honey, and watered wine. Musicians gather in corners, tuning their lyres. The scent of roasted fruit and cinnamon drifts through marble halls, sweet enough to hide the tension in the air. Everyone knows what time it is: Nero is about to wake. No one speaks his name too early. Even whispers carry risk. The emperor likes to believe his mornings begin with divine silence, as if the world waits for him to open his eyes. When the doors of his chamber finally creak open, that silence breaks like glass. The first sound is the soft shuffle of sandals, the servants retreating backwards. Heads lowered, eyes on the floor. Then his voice, low but theatrical: "Has the sun risen yet, or am I the first light of the day?" The people nearby laugh, carefully. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to prove they understand the joke is not meant to be funny, it is meant to be worshipped. He walks slowly toward the dining hall, wrapped in purple silk, the color reserved only for emperors. His hair is curled and polished like gold thread, his skin oiled to a shine. When he moves, he expects the room to rearrange itself around him. The dining hall itself is enormous, its ceiling painted with scenes of gods feasting in Olympus. Only the gods all look suspiciously like Nero. The floor sparkles with mosaic tiles depicting victories, temples, chariots, and flames. Everything here serves a single purpose: to remind you that you are standing inside a performance. And the emperor is always center stage. Breakfast is not a meal in this house. It is an act. You take your place along the marble table. The food is extravagant bowls of olives and pomegranates, warm bread, cheeses wrapped in leaves, but you know better than to eat too quickly. The emperor watches even the smallest movement. To eat before he does would be a mistake. To eat too little would be an insult. So you wait. He gestures for the musicians to begin. Soft strings fill the air. Then, smiling faintly, Nero picks up his lyre, the same one he used to serenade the palace during the fire that destroyed half of Rome, and strums the opening notes of one of his compositions. The room stills. His song is long, winding, full of self-praise. He sings of gods descending to earth to crown him with light, of oceans bowing to his empire, of his voice healing the sorrow of mankind. When he finishes, there is silence. It lasts less than a second. Then applause erupts sharp, frantic, perfectly synchronized. You clap too, because that is what everyone does. Applause here is not appreciation. It is insurance. Nero's smile widens. He raises his hand, and the room falls quiet again. He looks around the table, eyes glittering with a mix of vanity and suspicion. Tell me, he says softly, did you feel it? The touch of Apollo through my song. Everyone murmurs agreement. The senators praise his divine gift. The poets flatter his heavenly timbre. The musicians bow, pretending to be moved to tears. You nod, repeating the rehearsed words, it was radiant, Caesar. Inside, your heart beats too fast. You have learned that enthusiasm here must always sound sincere, never exaggerated, never hesitant. Even truth has to be calibrated. Because in Nero's world, a compliment given too slowly is an accusation. When the emperor laughs, you laugh. When he frowns, your breath tightens. Every word becomes choreography, every gesture a form of self-defense. The servants replace the empty trays with more roasted figs, honeyed wine, little cakes in the shape of birds. But the food barely matters. The emperor is not here to eat. He is here to be admired. And admiration is mandatory. He leans back, surveying the hall. The people of Rome, he says, they crave greatness. I give them music, art, vision. What have the gods given them that I have not? No one answers. It is not a question. It is a declaration. He laughs again, pleased by his own words. You force yourself to smile, though the sound makes your skin crawl. It is not cruelty that frightens you, it is his delight in being adored. You realize that for Nero, love is not emotion. It is evidence. When the emperor feels adored, Rome feels safe. When he doubts that adoration, the air itself becomes dangerous. A senator once failed to clap during a performance. The next day, his villa was confiscated, his family disappeared. The story spread like smoke, and since then, nobody forgets to clap. The palace runs on rhythm, applause at dawn, laughter at command, silence when dismissed. After the performance, the emperor invites everyone to drink. Servants pour wine into golden cups. The liquid glows deep red, catching the candlelight like blood. Nero raises his cup and declares, to Rome, eternal and bright. To Rome, everyone echoes. But the echo sounds hollow. You take a sip, careful not to drink too much. You have seen others grow too comfortable, too joyful, and pay for it later. Nero likes to test people, ask for their opinions, their loyalty, their laughter, and then punish them for giving too much or too little. The line between devotion and danger is invisible but always there. You learn to walk it like a tightrope. At the far end of the table, one of the younger attendants spills a drop of wine on the marble. The red stains the white surface like a wound. Time freezes. The girl's face drains of color. Nero looks at her, calm and slow. What do we call that color, he asks. She stammers, imperial red, my lord. A long pause. Then he smiles. Good answer. The room exhales again, pretending nothing happened. The girl's hands still shake as she wipes the floor. The scent of roses thickens, masking the sharpness of fear. That is how mornings work here. Beauty on the surface, terror underneath. Every smile carries calculation. Every act of grace hides survival. The emperor finishes his wine and stands. Prepare. The evening feast, he says, already bored. Tonight, I will sing again. Those words ripple through the palace like thunder. The day will now be shaped around this command. Musicians will rehearse, cooks will invent dishes that shimmer like jewels, decorators will fill rooms with petals and torchlight. And everyone, senators, courtiers, servants, women, will practice their expressions until they look effortlessly odd. You return to your chamber, dizzy from the performance. The corridors smell of incense and sweat. Somewhere deep in the palace, builders hammer new decorations for the evening spectacle. The noise blends with the sound of distant laughter and the scrape of marble being polished. The whole building feels alive, but not in a human way. More like a beast stretching before another hunt. By the time night falls, the dining hall has transformed again. Gold lamps burn on every pillar. The ceilings glimmer with reflections from silver mirrors. Tables bend under the weight of impossible food: stuffed peacocks, fruit glazed in honey, dishes that look like art more than nourishment. But the real feast is not for the stomach. It is for the emperor's ego. He makes his entrance to applause, wearing a tunic threaded with gemstones that catch the torchlight like stars. His crown of laurel leaves glitters as he raises his arms and declares, "Tonight, the gods will dine with us." No one doubts he means himself. As the feast begins, Nero calls for a story. A poet stands, trembling, and recites verses comparing the emperor's voice to divine thunder. Nero listens with half-lidded eyes, soaking in the adoration like sunlight. Every compliment feeds him, every pause risks offense. Halfway through the night, he grows restless. "Enough words," he says. "Let there be music." He steps onto the stage built at the end of the hall. The guests clap automatically. He begins to sing again about glory, about Rome, about his own eternal flame. It is not art anymore. It is hunger dressed in melody. The performance stretches for hours. Guests start to wilt, exhausted, but no one leaves. The doors are guarded. The emperor finishes his final note, holding it long enough for the audience to feel their hearts stop. Then silence. Then applause. Frantic and desperate, the kind that keeps people alive. Nero bows deeply, basking in the glow of his illusion. He sees love, but what fills the room is not love, it is relief. That is when you understand the real cost of his theater. Every performance demands belief, not in music or beauty, but in the lie that his power is eternal. The applause is the sound of people convincing themselves that pretending is safer than truth. The night ends in dizzy laughter and spilled wine. The guests stumble away, smiling too hard, while the emperor soaks in praise like it is sacred oil. You walk past the flickering torches, the fading music, the smell of roses wilting under the heat, and you realize something chilling. This palace is not a home. It is a stage built on fear. And every performance, every song, every feast, is a rehearsal for survival. Tomorrow, the same play will begin again. To the untrained eye, the Golden House looks like the safest place in the empire. Every corner is guarded, every meal inspected, every guest hand-picked by the emperor himself. But once you have lived here long enough, you learn the opposite truth: safety depends on invisibility. Being seen too much, too brightly, too often, is a death sentence wrapped in silk. At first, newcomers do not understand this. They arrive dazzled by the luxury, the perfume, the jewels, the honeyed wine, and believe that Nero's gaze is a blessing. They smile too eagerly when he looks at them. They linger too long in his presence, thinking favor means protection. And for a while, it does. He showers them with gifts, invites them to sit near him at feasts, calls them muses, stars, his dawn. Then one day, he stops smiling. No one ever knows why. Maybe a gesture annoyed him. Maybe a whisper reached his ear, maybe his own reflection felt dull that morning. But the same eyes that once adored now sharpen, searching for flaws. A joke he once laughed at becomes insolence. A necklace he gave you suddenly feels like a collar. And just like that, you vanish from the story. No one says your name again. Your chamber is emptied before sunrise. Your servants are reassigned. The musicians play louder the next morning, as if to drown the memory. This is how the palace erases people quietly, efficiently, without trace. It does not need blood to enforce fear. It just needs witnesses. Everyone sees what happens when the emperor's affection curdles. Everyone understands that the surest way to survive is to become a shadow. So you learn to dim yourself. You stop wearing colors too bright, speaking too often, laughing too loudly. You let others stand closer to the emperor. Feed his vanity, take his storms. You blend into the silk drapes and candlelight until you are part of the furniture again. There is a strange peace in invisibility. It is lonely, but it is safe. No one expects anything from you but silence. You can watch without being watched. You can breathe without drawing notice. But even that calm has rules. You must never appear too indifferent, because indifference looks like contempt. You must still smile when Nero sings. Still applaud when he performs, still murmur divine when he demands praise. You must exist just enough to be harmless, but never enough to be remembered. Every woman in the palace walks this same invisible tightrope. You can sense it in the way they move, the practiced stillness, the cautious glances, the way conversation dies the moment a servant enters the room. Everyone knows the walls have ears. The marble gleams not because it is polished, but because fear keeps hands from trembling. One evening, after a banquet, Nero calls for one of the harp players to perform again. She is young, with hair like polished copper and a voice soft as linen. He praises her skill, then commands her to sing a melody she composed herself. Her fingers shake, but she obeys. The song is delicate and sad, full of longing. Too human for this place. Too real. When she finishes, silence fills the hall. Nero's eyes linger on her face. Then he claps once slowly. You sing of sorrow, he says. Is my house so tragic? The girl bows deeply. No, my lord. I sing only what the gods place in my heart. He studies her for a long time, expression unreadable. Then perhaps the gods have given you too much heart. The next morning, she is gone. No one speaks of her again, but her absence becomes part of the air. The servants move even quieter. The musicians pluck softer strings, and every woman's smile grows a little thinner. The message is clear: beauty draws attention, and attention draws danger. In this palace, light does not just illuminate, it exposes. You start to understand why so many people here speak in riddles and compliments. Words can't be trusted, but they can protect you. You learn to answer questions the way mirrors reflect faces faithfully. But never fully. When Nero asks, "Do you love me?" you say, "Rome loves you, my lord." When he asks, "Am I a god?" you say, "The gods look upon you with envy." It is a language of survival, half truth, half smoke. Sometimes, in rare moments of exhaustion, you catch your reflection in the bronze mirrors along the corridor and barely recognize yourself. The woman staring back wears jewels heavy enough to bruise her collarbones. Her hair gleams. Her lips are red, her eyes perfectly still. She looks like she belongs here. But behind that stillness, there is something else, a flicker of awareness, a quiet defiance. The knowledge that survival does not mean surrender. It just means waiting for the world outside the gold to remember you exist. You start to listen differently. At night, when the wind moves through the palace vents, it carries fragments of whispers, servants muttering, guards gossiping, the distant hum of Rome itself still alive beyond these walls. The city does not care about the emperor's moods. It burns, rebuilds, laughs, sins. Real life continues. And that is what keeps you sane. Because deep down, you know Nero's empire of gold is fragile. It shines too brightly to last. The same people who bow to him now will cheer his downfall later. The same marble halls that echo with his songs will someday crumble into dust. Until then, you live carefully, breathing shallow, speaking light, shining just enough to be seen but not enough to be noticed. That is the paradox of survival in Nero's Rome. You must sparkle like gold, but never outshine the sun. There is a rhythm to life inside the golden house, and silence is its pulse. It is not a gentle or peaceful silence, the kind found in temples or gardens, but a thick, heavy quiet, like the air before a storm. You learn to move through it carefully. Every gesture deliberate, every word filtered through fear. At first, silence feels unnatural. You want to talk, to laugh, to share small truths with the others about the color of the morning light, about the smell of jasmine that seeps through the corridors, about the dreams that still haunt your sleep. But soon you learn that words are dangerous here. They travel too easily through marble walls and echo into ears that should not hear them. So, you begin to hold your tongue. You smile when you are expected to. You lower your gaze when someone speaks your name. You train yourself to listen without reacting. In Nero's world, silence is not weakness. It is armor. Those who talk too much disappear first. Sometimes quietly, sometimes dramatically, but always completely. Their names are erased from conversation, their rooms reassigned, their belongings redistributed. No one ever says, "She is gone." They just say, "Her quarters are empty." The palace does not need prisons. It teaches you to build your own cage inside your throat. Over time, you become fluent in quiet communication, the sideways glance, the faint nod, the slow inhale that means stop talking. Even laughter becomes coded. A soft exhale through the nose replaces what used to be joy. The people around you understand. It is the only way to stay alive. And yet, silence is not just about fear. It starts to shape you, to sharpen you. You begin to hear things you never noticed before, the faint crackle of torches, the rhythm of servant steps, the difference between polite applause and genuine panic. You hear the palace breathing, the sighs, the lies, the mechanical hum of obedience. In that stillness, you start to think again. The emperor thrives on noise, on clapping, on praise, on the echo of his own voice filling every corner. Silence unsettles him. It reminds him that control is never absolute, that no amount of gold can fill the void between adoration and truth. So you begin to use silence like a weapon, though you never admit it, even to yourself. When he performs and looks at you, waiting for praise, you clap on time, but your eyes stay calm, detached. He can't name what bothers him about it, but something in your quiet unnerves him. The louder he speaks, the more steady your stillness becomes. You discover that there is power in restraint, the power to withhold reaction, to make someone as vain as Nero feel uncertain. But this kind of defiance must be invisible. You bury it under layers of obedience. You bow when called, you sing when ordered, you listen when others flatter him. All the while, your silence becomes your secret. A thin, invisible line between submission and control. One afternoon, during a long rehearsal for one of Nero's performances, you sit among the other attendants as he demands perfection from the musicians. His temper flares when a harp string snaps. "Do you hear what failure sounds like?" he shouts. No one answers. The silence that follows is total. He breathes heavily, his fury melting into satisfaction. He likes silence when it feels like worship. But he fears it when it feels like distance. That is when you realize, silence can mean two things. To a tyrant, it can sound like reverence or resistance. The difference depends on who controls the meaning. From then on, you make silence your mask. You use it to survive the emperor's moods, to pass unnoticed through danger. To protect your thoughts from the ears that would twist them. And beneath that quiet, your mind sharpens. You start remembering details others overlook: the senator who trembles when Nero mentions taxes, the musician whose eyes flash with disgust before quickly lowering, the servant who leaves food uneaten because fear ruins appetite. You start seeing patterns in people's behavior, cracks in the gold. Silence makes you observant. Observation makes you dangerous. There is a strange comfort in that. You begin to understand the emperor more clearly than those who speak to him every day. His moods, his rituals, his desperate need for validation, they all follow a rhythm, like music played too often. Once you hear it, you can predict it. Once you can predict it, you can stay alive. At night, in your chamber, you let the mask slip. The walls still hum with distant echoes of laughter and liars. But you sit in true quiet. You watch the candle burn lower and whisper your thoughts only to yourself. Sometimes, you imagine the future, the day when this palace will be dust, when Nero's name will be remembered not for his beauty but for his madness. You do not hate him, exactly. Hatred requires too much energy. What you feel is something colder, endurance. The others call it faith or loyalty, but it is not. It is calculation. You have learned that survival in a gilded cage means conserving emotion. You can't afford despair, or love, or outrage. You can only afford patience. You no longer pray to the gods. You pray to time. Time will outlast him. Time will strip the gold from the walls, will let the wind crawl through these corridors again. Time will remember what people could not say. Until then, you stay silent. Each day, you wake, you breathe, you perform. You survive. The silence inside you grows stronger, not as fear anymore, but as focus. You have become so skilled at stillness that even the emperor no longer notices you. And that is your greatest protection. You have learned the final truth of the Golden House: silence is not submission. It is strategy. It is the language of those who endure what others can't. It is the promise that someday, when the gold has dulled and the applause has stopped, the only sound left will be your quiet, steady breath, proof that you outlasted him. The longer you live inside the Domus Aurea, the harder it is to tell where life ends and performance begins. The palace itself is built like a set, a masterpiece of illusion. Walls painted with gods that mirror Nero's own face. Columns carved so perfectly they seem alive in the torchlight. Even the air feels rehearsed, thick with incense that never fades. Every corridor is a backstage. Every doorway a frame for someone's entrance. Nothing happens by accident here. Servants are arranged like props, women like ornaments, senators like audience members pretending not to notice they are trapped in a play that never ends. You start to see the invisible choreography everywhere. The guards' footsteps always land in rhythm. The musicians start playing just as Nero enters, never a second too soon. Even the birds in the courtyard seem to have been trained to sing on cue. This is Nero's genius, if you can call it that. He does not just rule Rome, he directs it. He believes the empire exists to perform his greatness. And everyone plays along because the alternative is unthinkable. It is a strange kind of imprisonment, no chains, no locks, just endless applause. The palace has stages everywhere, banquet halls, gardens, bathhouses, even the corridors lined with mirrors. Nero appears in all of them. Sometimes dressed in gold. Sometimes in white robes like a priest, sometimes in armor for mock battles where no one dares to strike too hard. He acts, he sings, he recites. He loves the sound of his own name almost as much as the echo that follows it. You learn that the emperor's greatest fear is not rebellion. It is boredom. He demands constant spectacle. Gladiatorial games, poetry contests, mock weddings, sea battles in artificial lakes. Anything that can distract him from the silence he carries inside. When he grows restless, everyone grows terrified. Restless Nero invents new entertainments, and those always require victims. Sometimes he orders entire nights of theater performed for an audience of one, himself. He forces senators to dress as slaves, noblewomen to dance barefoot, generals to play gods begging for mercy. The more absurd the scene, the more he laughs. And everyone else laughs with him, because laughter is safer than silence. In those moments, the line between actor and prisoner vanishes completely. You clap, you bow, you sing, you perform until performance becomes your only language. One evening, you are ordered to join a private feast in the circular dining hall. The ceiling, made of ivory panels, slowly rotates as slaves hidden above release petals and perfume. The room smells of roses, wine, and sweat. Nero sits at the center, a crown of laurels resting on his oiled hair. Around him, senators and courtiers recline on couches, pretending to be at ease. The emperor's eyes roam over the crowd. Tonight, he says, we are all actors in the drama of the gods. I am Apollo. You are my chorus. Everyone murmurs agreement. He smiles, raising his cup. Then let the play begin. What follows is part comedy, part nightmare. One senator is forced to sing a hymn of praise, another to crawl on the floor as a supplicant. Nero claps. Then stands, proclaiming himself the god of the sun. As he spreads his arms, golden dust falls from the ceiling, catching the light like fire. The guests gasp on cue. You join them, eyes wide, hands trembling, but inside, you feel nothing. The beauty of it has curdled. You see through it now. The petals, the gold, the music, it is all camouflage. Behind it lies decay. Because what Nero has built is not art. It is fear dressed in costume. You glance at the senators' faces and recognize it the same hollow admiration you wear yourself. Everyone in the room knows this performance is not for entertainment. It is for survival. The emperor looks around, basking in the attention. He believes he is immortal, that as long as someone is watching, he can't fade. And for a fleeting second, you pity him. The palace may be his masterpiece, but it is also his prison. He can't stop performing any more than you can stop pretending to enjoy it. At the height of the evening, Nero orders the lights dimmed. The music fades. He begins to recite a poem about destruction and rebirth, his voice trembling with emotion. He imagines himself as a phoenix rising from ashes, a symbol of eternal power. The crowd listens, unmoving, afraid to breathe too loudly. When he finishes, the applause is thunderous. But beneath that applause, something else stirs. A collective exhaustion, shared but unspoken. You feel it in your bones, the weariness of people forced to perform faith they no longer believe in. When the feast ends, Nero retreats to his private chambers, leaving behind trails of spilled wine and crushed petals. The courtiers exhale like survivors of a storm. Their faces sag, their smiles dissolve. Someone mutters a prayer for dawn. You walk through the dark corridors back to your room, the gold walls gleaming faintly in the lamplight. The silence returns not peaceful, but suffocating. You realize that the Golden House does not just display Nero's vanity. It feeds on it. The palace itself seems alive, watching, listening, rehearsing tomorrow's performance. And you, like everyone else, are both its audience and its actor. Sometimes, late at night, you whisper into the darkness, "If this is theater, when does the curtain fall?" But no answer comes. Only the sound of your own breath. Steady and small, echoing off marble that has been trained never to answer back. In this world, truth is never spoken aloud. It exists only in glances, in hesitation, in the quiet between songs. And in that quiet, you begin to hear a faint rebellion, the smallest, most human sound in a palace built for gods, the whisper of people remembering they are still alive. In a place where every wall listens, truth must travel in disguise. The Golden House hums with secrets that dare not be spoken aloud. Drifting instead through servants' hands, over goblets of watered wine, between curtained glances at the baths. Gossip here is not vanity, it is survival. It is the last living language of honesty left inside a palace built on performance. It starts small. A whisper that one of the senators has fallen from favor. A rumor that a musician's song reminded Nero of a dead friend and earned her exile. A servant murmurs that the emperor's mother's ghost still walks the lower halls, her sandals scratching the marble like fingernails. No one ever says whether any of it is true. Truth matters less than what it signals, who is rising, who is trembling, who might vanish next. You learn to listen the way others pray. In the morning, you watch the pattern of who sits near Nero at breakfast. At night, you note which lamps burn late outside the emperor's private rooms. The gossip fills in what cannot be spoken openly. It tells you where danger will fall before it arrives. It tells you how to stay unseen. It is strange, how quickly rumor replaces trust. People do not talk to each other anymore, they talk around each other. Every conversation is half message, half trap. You start to recognize the code. When someone says, "The emperor was in fine spirits today," they really mean, "He did not kill anyone." When they say, "The music pleased him," they mean, "We survived another night." Even laughter has layers. When people laugh too loud, it is not joy, it is fear trying to drown itself out. There is one woman you trust more than the rest, Lucia, an older servant who tends to the lamps near the main hall. She has been here longer than anyone remembers, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes bright but tired. She never gossips loudly, but she always knows things before others do. You once asked her how. "Because I clean up what people leave behind," she said softly. "Wine. Petals, words, they all stain." One evening, while you help her trim the wicks, she tells you that Nero has been having nightmares. "He dreams of fire again," she says. "Screams in the streets. The city burning. He wakes shouting for musicians, for noise, anything to drown the silence." You shiver. You remember the stories from outside the Great Fire of Rome, the one Nero claimed to have watched from his tower while singing of Troy's destruction. Most people believe he started it himself. He blames the Christians, the gods, the stars. Anyone but his own need for spectacle. Now, it seems, the flames follow him even in sleep. That night, the palace feels different. The music plays louder, the torches burn longer. Nero orders the halls filled with laughter, as if noise can keep nightmares at bay. But the servants know better. The more he tries to bury the fire with song, the closer it creeps to the surface. The gossip grows darker. Someone whispers that the emperor has begun, accusing his friends of plotting against him. Someone else says he has built secret tunnels under the palace in case he needs to flee. A musician swears she saw him pacing the gardens alone, muttering to statues as if they could answer back. In the baths, you hear a murmur, he is becoming afraid of mirrors. You pretend not to react, but the words cling to you. Mirrors fill every room of this palace, they reflect his image endlessly. If even those reflections now turn against him, what hope is left for anyone else? Lucia shakes her head when you tell her. When a man believes his reflection is an enemy, she says, the world is already burning again. The next morning, you see evidence of it. Nero cancels breakfast, claiming illness. His guards double in number. Courtiers avoid eye contact. The silence feels sharper, like a drawn blade. Even the fountains outside seem quieter, as though the water itself fears to move. You begin to notice how gossip here is not just conversation, it is prophecy. Every whispered fear becomes reality within days. The palace runs on rumor like an empire runs on grain. It feeds the fear that keeps everyone obedient. But sometimes, amid the poison, a different kind of whisper surfaces. One that sounds like hope. A servant tells you quietly that soldiers have begun speaking against the emperor. That senators in secret meetings question whether Rome can survive another year of his rule. That outside these gilded walls, the people have begun to hate the name Nero. You do not dare believe it, but the thought lingers. What if the silence in this palace could be broken not by applause, but by the roar of truth returning? You say nothing, of course. You keep your head bowed, your face calm. But inside, something stirs. The gossip that once chained you now feels like a thread, thin but real, pulling you toward the world beyond the gold. Every night, you sit by the window and listen to the sounds of the city far below. Laughter. Dogs barking. A cart rattling on the stones. Real sounds. Imperfect, alive. They remind you that somewhere outside this cage, people still speak without fear. And you begin to wonder, what if the only honest voice left in Nero's empire is not his song, but the quiet murmur of those who've learned how to whisper without being caught? In the golden house, truth cannot shout. But it survives all the same in half-sentences, in sidelong glances, in words carried softly between hands that tremble. It is not loud. But it is patient. And sometimes, patience is what truth needs to outlast a god. There are mornings when the palace feels less like a home and more like a gallery, one filled not with art, but with living exhibits. The women are its statues, polished and perfumed into perfection. The servants are the invisible strings that keep the display in motion. And the emperor, always watching, is the curator of it all. You wake before dawn to the sound of water being poured into marble basins. The attendants move with quiet precision, heating oils, grinding powders, polishing jewels. They do not ask what you want. Choice does not exist here. The ritual begins the same way every day, a choreography of control disguised as beauty. First, your hair is washed with rose water and combed until it shines. Then comes the powder for your skin, the paint for your lips, the oil for your arms. A servant kneels to fasten a necklace that sits heavy against your throat. Every step erases a little more of who you are and replaces it with what Nero expects you to be, flawless, distant, divine. You sit still through it all, watching your reflection take shape. The mirror does not lie, but it does not tell the truth either. It shows the version of you that survives here, the artwork, not the person. When the attendants finish, they step back and bow. You stand, the silk of your gown whispering as it falls to the floor. For a moment, you almost believe in the illusion. You almost believe the beauty belongs to you. But then you see the same reflection in every other woman's eyes, and you remember, you are not special. You are symmetry. The palace demands this performance daily. Beauty is not self-expression, it is obedience. The baths are another kind of ritual. Warm milk and petals, mirrors lining the walls, women arranged in careful order like offerings. Laughter echoes off the marble, but it sounds hollow, rehearsed. No one truly relaxes. Everyone knows the emperor's spies wander even here, noting who seems joyful, who seems weary, who might soon displease. One of the younger girls, barely 16, asks in a whisper, "Do you think he sees us as people?" An older one smiles faintly. "No. He sees us as light." It sounds poetic until you realize what she means. Light is beautiful, but it does not last. By midday, you are summoned to stand in the audience hall. Nero is meeting foreign envoys. You and several others have been chosen to decorate the scene arranged like flowers in a vase. You stand still, your hands folded, your face serene. The emperor speaks, his voice carrying across the chamber. Rich and musical. You do not listen to his words. You watch his eyes instead. They glide across the room, pausing only when he wants to see how admiration reflects back at him. When his gaze meets yours, you bow slightly, not too low, not too slow. The perfect gesture. He smiles faintly and moves on. You exhale without sound. One more moment survived. After the audience ends, you return to your chamber. The attendants remove your jewelry. Unpin your hair, wash the paint from your skin. Each piece of gold leaves behind a faint mark, a red imprint like a bruise. You look down at your arms and see the traces of your own display. Beauty, here, is not pleasure. It is exhaustion disguised as grace. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you refused, if you came to breakfast without the oils, the gems, the performance. But then you remember the harpist who sang the wrong song. You remember the laughter that stopped midair. You remember that perfection is the price of safety. So you endure the rituals. You perfect the art of stillness. You learn to make your face unreadable. At night, you see the other women sitting by the baths, their faces stripped of color, their eyes dull. In that dim candlelight, the masks drop. You see not rivals or courtiers, but survivors, each one caught in the same painted silence. There is a kind of understanding among you. Unspoken but deep. If beauty is your prison, you might as well master its rules. You polish your chains until they gleam. You move like grace itself, not because you believe in it, but because moving otherwise might get you killed. Yet something shifts quietly inside you. You begin to see the irony in it all. Nero surrounds himself with beauty to prove he is divine, but it only exposes his hunger. The more perfection he gathers, the more fragile he becomes. You realize that his obsession is not about control, it is about fear. He cannot bear what he cannot possess, and so he turns people into ornaments to stop them from being real. One evening, as you are being adorned for another feast, the mirror catches a slant of candlelight, and you see yourself doubled, one reflection shimmering, the other faint beneath it. The surface image is flawless. Painted, polished, untouchable. But beneath that surface, through the faint silver of the glass, you see a pair of tired eyes staring back. You blink, and for the briefest moment, you feel both versions of yourself at once, the artwork and the witness. The illusion and the survivor. That night, Nero calls for music. The women dance, draped in gold, their bodies bending with elegance that hides fatigue. You stand among them. Swaying gently, your smile practiced to perfection. The emperor claps, entranced by his own reflection in your movements. But somewhere in that rhythm, you feel something strange, a pulse that does not belong to him. A heartbeat of your own. You realize then that beauty can't fully be owned. Even when forced into performance, it carries something untamed, a flicker that does not belong to the emperor or his palace. It belongs to you. You keep that flicker alive, hidden behind painted lips and lowered eyes. It is small, almost invisible, but real. The others sense it too. It passes between you in glances, in half smiles, in the way you breathe when he is not looking. Maybe that is what keeps you alive, the quiet understanding that even in a house built to display perfection, there is still something imperfect, human, and free breathing beneath the surface. And that, in this place, is the most beautiful thing of all. By nightfall, the palace glows like a second sun. Torches line every corridor, their flames reflected 1,000 times in the gilded walls. From a distance, the Domus Aurea must look like a city on fire, but inside, the blaze is made of perfume and fear. You already know what the night will bring. Nero has announced another feast, and that means everyone must become both audience and decoration. The musicians have been practicing all day. The cooks sweating in the marble kitchens, the servants polishing the silver until they can see their own anxious faces in it. You stand before the mirror again, though you barely need help anymore. You have learned every gesture of preparation by heart. The gown, the jewels, the careful sweep of gold dust across your shoulders. Beauty is no longer an effort. It is reflex. The only part that still feels human is the quiet breath you take before the door opens. When the guards escort you into the dining hall, the sight is almost blinding. The ceiling, painted with scenes of the heavens, spins slowly, an invention Nero ordered so that the stars would always move above him, even indoors. Petals fall from hidden openings in the roof, landing on hair, on wine, on the emperor's robe of purple and silver. The air smells of roses, smoke, and roasted meat. Laughter rings out bright, hollow, rehearsed. The emperor reclines at the center of the curved table. A golden cup in one hand, his eyes sharp with satisfaction. Around him sit Rome's most powerful men and most beautiful women, all pretending to enjoy themselves. The feast has begun, and the performance resumes. The first course is served on plates of amber and glass. A senator cracks a joke about the gods, and everyone laughs before Nero does, afraid to be late. He smiles faintly, letting them think they have pleased him. Then he gestures toward the musicians. Play something worthy of a god's appetite. The flutes begin, soft and slow. Nero listens for a while, then interrupts. No. That is not the rhythm of victory. He takes the lyre from one of the players, strums it himself, and begins to sing. The room stills instantly. His voice is strong, theatrical. The song tells of the sun god descending to earth to bless Rome through a single mortal vessel, himself. You have heard it before. Everyone has. But every time, you must react as though it is new, transcendent, divine. When the final note fades, a silence follows, heavy as stone. No one wants to be the first to clap. Then one of the courtiers, a young man with nervous eyes, starts applauding frantically. The others join in. The emperor watches, amused. He gestures to the young man. You there. You felt the gods, did not you? The man stammers, I did, my lord. It was glorious. Nero smiles and motions for wine to be poured for him. Then drink to their glory. He drinks, too quickly. The emperor's smile hardens. Another. He drinks again. And again. The laughter in the hall is sharp, unnatural. When the man begins to sway, Nero waves his hand. Take him out. Let him sleep it off. The guards drag him away. The laughter resonates, even louder this time, because the louder it is, the less anyone has to think. That is how loyalty is measured here, not by courage or conviction, but by the precision of your laughter. You must know exactly when to find something amusing, exactly when to hold your breath. Too much joy is vanity. Too little is suspicion. The perfect balance keeps you alive. You sip your wine and pretend to enjoy the spectacle. Across the room, another woman's eyes meet yours. Her smile does not reach her face. She is performing, too. You both are. Everyone here is an actor trapped inside the emperor's endless play. As the feast continues, the food grows more elaborate, more absurd. Peacocks glazed with honey, fish dyed purple to match the emperor's robe, cakes shaped like miniature temples. Servants pour wine until it spills across the floor, staining the marble like blood. Between courses, Nero demands poetry. A trembling senator recites lines comparing the emperor's voice to thunder. Nero listens. Satisfied, then recites his own verses in reply, longer, louder, grander. The audience claps, their palms red from the effort. You start to feel the weight of exhaustion pressing behind your smile. The laughter, the light, the constant tension, it all begins to blur. The feast stretches deep into the night, a performance without end. And then, suddenly, the emperor grows quiet. He leans forward, eyes sharp, scanning the faces before him. The music falters. The air freezes. Tell me, he says softly, if I died tomorrow, who among you would mourn me? No one dares to breathe. Then someone near the end of the table blurts out, all of Rome would weep, my lord. Nero stares at him for a long time, then bursts into laughter. Good, you have learned your lines. The room exhales again. Laughter returns, brittle and too loud. You realize then that every question he asks, every test he gives, has only one correct answer, adoration. And even that answer must sound effortless, as though it springs from love, not fear. When the banquet finally ends, the courtiers stumble out into the torchlit corridors, their faces stiff with exhaustion. You walk past them quietly, your steps slow, your ears ringing from the noise. The smell of wine and smoke clings to your hair. Behind you, Nero's laughter echoes through the marble halls, bouncing off the ceilings, following you down the corridor like a ghost that refuses to rest. You think of how easily he can turn affection into punishment, joy into terror. You think of how many people tonight smiled not because they wanted to but because they needed to. That is the real cost of life in the Golden House. You must trade sincerity for survival. Laughter for breath. Every emotion becomes currency, every gesture a bet. And as you return to your chamber, one truth settles heavy in your chest. In this palace, love is not the opposite of fear. It is just one of its disguises. When the banquets end and the torches dim, the palace does not sleep. The corridors quiet, but the air remains thick, perfumed with roses, heavy with wine, vibrating faintly from the laughter that has only just died. This is the hour when Nero becomes most unpredictable. He calls it his private time, as if privacy were still possible in a house that reflects him from every wall. Sometimes, he summons musicians. Sometimes, he demands conversation. Sometimes, he calls for one of the women to sit beside him, not as an empress, not as a slave, but as something in between. You have been called before. You know the ritual. You walk through the empty hallways. The echo of your own footsteps, a small act of rebellion. The chamber where he waits glows with low firelight. The emperor reclines on a couch of red silk, bare feet resting on the skin of a lion. He looks almost human in this softer light, less god, more boy. Sit, he says, without looking up. You do. A long silence follows. He is reading something, a scroll, a poem, perhaps one of his own. His lips move as he traces the lines. Then he speaks. Do you think people love me? The question sounds simple, but it is not. Every question in this palace is a snare disguised as curiosity. You pause just long enough to seem thoughtful. Rome loves its emperor, you say. He smirks faintly. That is not what I asked. He rises and begins to pace. They cheer, they applaud, they shout my name. But that is not love. That is noise. His voice lowers. I want to know if anyone truly sees me. You keep your eyes down. It is dangerous to see too much of a man who wants to be a god. He sits again. Closer this time. His tone softens. You never flatter me. That is why I like you. It is not a compliment. It is a test. You offer the smallest smile. Your greatness does not need flattery. He laughs quietly, and for a fleeting second, it almost sounds genuine. You speak like a philosopher, he says. I should have been one, you know. If not for this burden. He gestures vaguely to the room, the gold. The empire itself. Do you think I asked for it? You could tell him no one truly asks to be worshipped. You could tell him that power always pretends to be a curse once it becomes too heavy. But you do not. You nod instead. Perhaps the gods chose you because no one else could bear it. He likes that. His expression softens, his hand brushing the air as if blessing your answer. Then, suddenly, he grows quiet again. His eyes unfocus. His shoulders sink. For a moment, the emperor disappears, and in his place sits a man fragile, lonely, drowning in his own reflection. Sometimes I think the fire never went out, he says softly. I still smell the smoke. You say nothing. You know what he means. The great fire of Rome still follows him like a shadow. Outside, people whisper that he said it himself, that he watched from his balcony while the city burned and sang of heroes. Inside these walls, no one dares mention it. But it lives in his dreams, and perhaps in his conscience, whatever remains of it. He looks at you suddenly. Do you fear me? Another trap. You have learned to answer with layers. I fear the weight you carry, not the man himself. He stares for a long time, as if trying to decide whether that is flattery or truth. Finally, he smiles, faint but tired. You are clever. Then he leans back. His mood shifting again like a change in weather. You know, sometimes I imagine burning it all, the gold, the palace, everything, and starting over. Building a world that finally understands me. You keep your breathing steady. He is not asking for advice. He is confessing to the only witness who can't refuse to listen. He closes his eyes. You should sing for me, he says. Something soft. Something that does not end. You sing. Your voice is low, steady, stripped of meaning. It fills the room like smoke, hiding both of you inside it. He relaxes, eyes half shut, head tilted back. You wonder if he believes this is intimacy, this strange, rehearsed quiet where both participants are pretending not to be afraid. When the song ends, he reaches out and takes your hand. His fingers are cold. You are not like the others, he murmurs. You do not answer. There is nothing to say. Moments like these are their own kind of theater. They feel private. But they are not. The guards outside are listening. The servants will repeat every word by dawn. And you know, deep down, that Nero does not seek company, he seeks reflection. He wants to hear his own doubts echoed back to him in a gentler voice. You let him. That is how you survive. He releases your hand and rises, signaling the moment is over. You may go, he says, already turning away. You bow and leave. As you walk back through the dark corridor, the torches flicker on the polished walls. For a heartbeat, you see your reflection repeated again and again, dozens of versions of yourself moving through the silence, all of them wearing the same calm mask. You stop for a moment and realize how strange it is that even your most private moments belong to him. Every gesture rehearsed, every word approved, even your silence shaped by his presence. But beneath all that, a thought stirs. If even the emperor can't tell where the performance ends, maybe the play is no longer his alone. Maybe the act has begun to slip from his hands. You walk on, the gold fading behind you, your reflection dimming until only one version of you remains, the one that still knows the difference between acting and living. And in that smallest, quietest difference, you feel something close to freedom. By the time the first light crawls into the palace, the torches have burned low, the wine has gone sour, and the laughter has turned to echoes. The marble halls look softer in the morning haze, but the quiet feels heavier, like the weight of all that has been performed through the night. You wake to that silence and realize, you have survived another day. It does not sound like much, but in Nero's house, survival is a kind of art. The servants move slowly now, cleaning the ruins of the emperor's joy, petals crushed underfoot, broken glass, scraps of silk. They speak in whispers, trading glances instead of words. They all know the rhythm. The morning after the feast is the most dangerous time. Nero rarely sleeps, and when he does, he dreams badly. If he wakes in a foul mood, someone will pay the price for it. You rise quietly, stepping over the traces of gold dust on the floor. Outside your window, Rome is stirring, carts creaking, dogs barking, a hawker calling for bread. The city feels alive in a way the palace never does. Ordinary life breathes beyond these walls, and you can almost taste its air. You move through the corridor toward the inner garden, the only place where you can still hear the sound of water that is not part of an orchestra. The fountain trickles softly. The air smells of damp stone and mint. For a moment, the world feels almost clean again. A shadow moves nearby. It is Lucia, the lamp keeper. Her hands are streaked with soot, her hair pinned carelessly. She nods at you, the way soldiers nod after battle. No words needed. She knows you made it through the night. You sit together on the edge of the fountain, letting the cool mist touch your face. The gold sunlight filters through the vines, turning them green and quiet. Another feast, she says softly. Another dawn, you reply. She smiles. Faintly. That is what we count now, is not it, not days. Dawns. You do not answer. You do not need to. In this palace, dawn is proof of existence. After a while, Lucia stands and leaves to light the hallway lamps for the morning. You stay a little longer, staring at the water. It ripples faintly, reflecting both the sky and the faint shimmer of gold from the ceiling above. Two worlds colliding in a single reflection, the free and the trapped. The living and the gilded. You dip your fingers into the fountain. The cold runs up your arm like a shock. You imagine it washing away the scent of perfume, the painted stillness, the mask you wore through the night. The palace behind you begins to stir again, footsteps, orders, the familiar hum of control returning. You take a deep breath and stand. The game will start again soon, the same performances. The same smiles, the same dangers dressed in silk. But you have learned something the emperor never will. You have learned how to be invisible without disappearing. You have learned how to move through gold without letting it stick to your skin. And that is its own kind of rebellion. In the great halls, Nero will soon rise, demanding to be adored once more. He will perform his music, his laughter, his divinity. The courtiers will bow. The senators will applaud, the palace will spin on its golden axis. But beneath it all, a quiet rhythm will remain the steady, unshaken heartbeat of those who endure. Every smile you give him now is no longer fear. It is strategy. Every bow is camouflage. You have turned his stage into your shield. One day, the rumors say, the empire will turn against him. The soldiers will refuse his commands. The Senate will name him enemy of the state. And when that day comes, the same halls that once echoed with applause will ring with silence again. Only this time, it will not be obedience. It will be relief. You do not know when that day will arrive. Maybe you won't live to see it. But you carry its promise quietly, like a secret coin hidden under your tongue. For now, survival is enough. You return to your chamber, past the mirrors without looking. You have learned that reflections lie. You sit by the window instead, watching the light crawl across the marble floor. It is the first honest thing you have seen all day. And in that soft, uncertain light, you feel something that almost resembles peace. Not triumph peace. The kind that comes when you realize that endurance is victory in slow motion. The kind that belongs to those who refuse to disappear, even when their silence is the only thing keeping them alive. As the palace awakens behind you, you whisper into the air, just once, so softly that even the walls can't catch it. I am still here. And that small, defiant truth feels louder than all the music in the emperor's world. In the end, it happens quietly. Not with thunder, not with the roar of revolt, but with the slow unraveling of belief. That is how empires end, not when the people lose their fear, but when the performance stops convincing even the actors themselves. The signs appear long before Nero sees them. The musicians start playing softer, as if tired of their own songs. The servants bow a second slower. The senator's laughter begins to sound thin, forced, empty. Even the walls, once polished until they shone like suns, begin to dull with the weight of smoke and age. But Nero still performs. He wakes each day and demands applause from those who have none left to give. He hosts feasts for audiences that no longer taste the food. He sings for gods who have gone silent. He cannot see that his empire's gold is only a reflection, and reflections fade when no one looks anymore. You watch it all quietly. You have become so practiced at silence that it now feels like clarity. The fear that once ruled your body has settled into something calmer, something close to wisdom. You have stopped counting days, stopped marking time. You simply watch. One morning, rumors drift through the corridors like the scent of decay. The army has turned. The Senate has declared Nero an enemy of Rome. His statues are being torn down in the streets. The laughter that once echoed through the Golden House has moved outside its walls, where it finally sounds real. The palace tightens. Doors close, guards vanish, courtiers flee. You hear shouts in the distance, the hurried scrape of sandals, the dull thud of furniture being moved to block entrances. Even now, Nero's attendants try to preserve the illusion, lighting candles, arranging his robes, preparing his lyre. The play must go on, even as the theater burns. When you see him again, he looks smaller. Not because the room has grown, but because the light has changed. The gold around him no longer flatters, it exposes. His face is drawn, his voice hoarse from too much speaking, too little listening. He turns to you suddenly, as if seeing you for the first time. They have betrayed me, he says. All of them. My people. My Rome. You do not answer. You have learned there are moments when truth serves better than comfort, but this is not one of them. He would not understand truth now, even if it stood before him wearing his crown. He sinks into his chair, staring at nothing. They do not deserve me, he whispers. They never did. You realize he is talking to himself, not to you. He always was. The palace grows quieter over the next hours. Servants slip away one by one. The music stops. Somewhere outside, the sound of distant chaos hums, a city shaking off its fever. That night, Nero flees. They say he rides out disguised, hiding his face under a cloak. They say he finds refuge in a friend's villa, where, cornered and abandoned, he finally ends his own life. Some say his last words were, "What an artist dies in me." Others say he died screaming. You never see him again. Days later, the soldiers arrive. They strip the palace of valuables, jewels, tapestries, silver. They pry gold from the walls. The Domus Aurea, once the symbol of divine glory, becomes a hollow carcass, its splendor looted, its echo changed. Sunlight pours through the broken ceilings, harsh and unflattering. The dust rises, soft and gray. You walk through it once more, barefoot, tracing the path you used to take every morning. The marble is cracked, the air smells of ash and oil. In the grand hall, the mosaic of Apollo, Nero's favorite image, lies shattered across the floor. His face has split cleanly down the middle. And there, for the first time, you breathe freely. The silence is different now. It is not fearful. It is honest. You can hear the faint sounds of Rome beyond the ruins, children shouting, vendors calling, life returning. The empire moves on, unbothered by the fall of one man's vanity. You find Lucia among the survivors, still tending the lamps, though there is no emperor left to see them burn. She looks at you, her face lit by the last flame. So, she says softly, the gods have gone quiet. You shake your head. Maybe they were never speaking. She smiles, weary but peaceful. Then maybe it is finally our turn to make noise. For a moment, the two of you stand there in the wreckage, listening to the wind slip through the broken walls. The sound is strange, raw, imperfect, alive. You close your eyes and imagine the palace years from now. Covered in earth, forgotten by power, rediscovered by strangers who will marvel at the beauty, never knowing what it cost. They will call it magnificent, not realizing that every inch of gold was bought with silence. You leave before the soldiers can return. The city feels brighter than you remembered, loud, flawed, unpolished. You walk among the people. And for the first time, no one watches. No one expects you to shine. The sunlight hits your face without reflection. It is not divine. It is not gold. But it is real. And as you move through the noise of ordinary life, you understand the truth that the emperor never could. Power dazzles, but it cannot last. Beauty enslaves, but it cannot own. Fear silences, but it cannot erase. In the end, everything built on worship turns to dust. But those who survive in silence, they carry the story forward. You do not look back at the palace. You have already taken what mattered most from it. You are still alive. Thank you for staying with me through the echoes of Nero's golden world, where beauty was a cage, and silence was the only language that kept you alive. If this glimpse into Rome's darkest stage left you thinking, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What do you think, was Nero a monster? Or just a man lost inside his own performance? Until next time, keep your curiosity sharp and your heart steady. History still has plenty of whispers left to uncover.